My name is Anne. I'm 28 now, but this story began 6 years ago, when I thought I had everything figured out. Back then, I was just a simple girl working at a small publishing house in Seattle. My world was quiet, filled with coffee breaks, rainy mornings, and the sound of pages turning. I didn't have much, but I had peace. And then, Tony walked in. He wasn't the kind of man who entered a room. He commanded it. Tall, confident, with eyes that looked like they'd seen the world and still found reasons to smile. He was charming in a way that made you forget to breathe for a second. I remember the first time our eyes met across the office. He smiled, that effortless, confident kind of smile that says I see you, even in a crowd. I laughed at something he said that day, and he told me later that it was the moment he knew. Weeks turned into months. Coffee breaks turned into late-night talks. Somewhere between shared laughter and gentle silences, I fell in love with him. Completely, recklessly, beautifully. When Tony proposed to me on a cold winter evening under Christmas lights, I didn't even let him finish his sentence before saying yes. For me, that was the beginning of forever. But what I didn't know then was that forever doesn't always mean what you think it does. The first few months of marriage felt like a dream. Tony and I built a little world of our own. Sunday breakfasts, midnight movies, quiet walks by the lake. He'd hold my hand in crowded places and whisper, "You're my peace, Anne." And for a long time, I believed him. But life has a strange way of testing what looks perfect from the outside. It started small. Missed dinners, unanswered calls, work trips that kept getting longer. Tony became distant, quieter. His laughter faded into silence. I told myself it was stress, that every marriage goes through phases. But deep down, something inside me began to ache. One evening, I found him sitting alone in the dark, staring at nothing. When I asked what was wrong, he smiled faintly and said, "I'm fine, Anne. Just tired." But his eyes, they weren't tired. They were haunted. I started to feel like a stranger in my own home, walking on eggshells, afraid to ask too many questions. The warmth between us began to cool, replaced by quiet tension and unspoken distance. Still I held on. Because when you love someone that deeply, you convince yourself that love can fix anything. But sometimes, love alone isn't enough. It was a rainy evening, the kind where the world feels heavy and quiet. Tony had just come home from another business trip. His clothes were soaked, his expression unreadable. As he went upstairs to change, his phone buzzed on the table. I don't usually touch his things, but something inside me whispered. A message glowed on the screen. "I miss you already. Last night felt like a dream." My heart froze. My hands trembled as I scrolled. Dozens of messages. Late-night calls. Pictures I wish I never saw. It wasn't just another woman. It was someone I knew. His own brother's wife. Elena. The realization shattered me. The man I loved, the man I believed in, was living a double life right beside me. When Tony came down, he noticed the phone in my hand. For a second, his eyes widened, then softened into guilt. And I can explain. But I didn't want explanations. Not tonight. Not ever. I walked out into the rain, feeling it wash over me, cold, heavy, endless. And in that moment, I realized, sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It breaks you. The night after the truth came out, silence filled the house. Tony tried to talk, but I couldn't even look at him. Every word felt like a lie, every breath a reminder of his betrayal. Then came the knock on the door. It was his brother, Daniel. The same man whose wife Tony had been seeing behind his back. His eyes were red, his voice shaking. "Where is he, Anne?" I froze. I knew that look. It wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was rage. Tony stepped out, guilt painted across his face. "Dan, please just listen." But Daniel didn't want to listen. One punch. Then another. Years of brotherhood turned into years of hate in seconds. I screamed, trying to stop them, but their anger drowned out everything. The storm outside grew louder. Thunder roared. And then silence. Tony lay on the floor, bleeding, barely breathing. Daniel stood over him, his face pale, trembling, the weight of what he'd done sinking in. "He took everything from me," he whispered. "Now, I've taken it back." That night, the rain didn't stop. And neither did the guilt. The sirens came minutes later. Daniel didn't run. He just stood there, drenched in rain, staring at his own hands as if trying to wash off the guilt that would never fade. Tony was taken to the hospital. Alive, but barely. I sat there in the waiting room, shivering, hearing the echoes of that night replay in my mind. Two brothers destroyed. One woman caught between them, and a love that had turned into a curse. When Tony finally opened his eyes, he didn't look at me, not once. He just said, "I'm sorry, but it's too late for us." Days turned into weeks. The trial came and went. Daniel was sentenced, and I was left alone. I walked away from that life, carrying the weight of every mistake, every secret, every moment of weakness. Sometimes at night, I still hear Tony's voice, in the rain, in the silence, whispering, "If only love hadn't been so cruel." But life doesn't give you rewinds, only lessons. And this one, I'll never forget.